Welcome to Heian Haven. I'm Dawn. Today we're discussing Chapter 23 of the Tale of Genji, Hatsune. We'll start with our usual summary for shared context. Chapter 23 follows directly from the previous chapter. We begin on New Year's Day as spring's first sprouts of green are appearing. Murasaki's garden is magnificent. She divides her gentlewomen, sending the younger to serve her little girl and keeping the older ones for herself. The gentlewomen are singing and relaxing, celebrating, when Genji peeks in on them, and he offers to pray for their wishes and endeavor to make some of them come true. Genji takes special care with his dress and visits his ladies in the evening, beginning with Murasaki. The two exchange vows of love for 1,000 years. He next visited his daughter, where he found her page girls pulling up pine seedlings. Her mother, the lady from Akashi, has sent New Year's gifts, including a mechanical warbler on a branch of pine. He instructed his daughter to write a reply poem, her first song of spring, Hatsune. Hanachiru Sato received the next visit. Their relationship was easy, though no longer physically intimate. She was faithful, and he was steady, and their conversations left them both happy. Genji found his adopted daughter, Tamakazura, dazzling, and her quarters well appointed for how short a time she had been living at Rokujo. He encouraged her to visit with his daughter and Murasaki. The lady from Akashi's apartment smelled of rich incense and perfume, creating a romantic atmosphere. Genji read some stray snippets of poems she had written, and when she appeared, her looks and manner were so refined he decided to spend the night with her, knowing full well Murasaki would be quite upset. He returned to Murasaki before dawn and after some cajoling, pretended to sleep. Using the stream of guests the next day as an excuse, Genji avoided Murasaki for most of the day. A few days later, Genji paid a visit to the eastern pavilion of his Nijo villa. There he spent a small amount of time with the Hitachi princess, his Princess Safflower, who lived in peace studying books in kana, and who also had zero fashion sense. Utsutsume, the lady of the molted cicada shell, now a nun, lived in sparse but elegant rooms appointed for her devotions to the Buddha. Genji was touched that she wore the robes he gave her. Mid-month, gentlemen of the court participated in the Otokotoka, where they sung saibara and performed dances for the Imperial Palace, the Suzaku Palace, and lastly at Rokujo, where they received an extravagant welcome and after their performance, gifts that rivaled those given by the emperor. Genji's son and Tono Chujo's second son sang very well. The ladies of the Rokujo estate all witnessed the performance. Genji decides to have his own concert and concluding banquet in the second or third month to reward the performers, and all his ladies assist as they are able with his preparations. I found this chapter to be a satisfying conclusion to the last as we go along with Genji as he visits all his ladies in their New Year outfits, which of course means I'll focus on a lot of translation differences between clothing descriptions. But let's start with the title, Hatsune. Waley calls it the first song of the year. This is in reference to a poetic exchange between the lady from Akashi and her daughter. From that same exchange, we can see why Seidensticker translates the title as the first warbler, as the lady compares her daughter to the harbinger of spring, the warbler. Tyler gives us the warbler's first song, referencing both the actual song of the bird, which is a sign of spring, and the first poem written by the Akashi princess. Let's remember that poem, uta, can also be read as song. I like Washburn's first song of spring, but Tyler says that Hatsune directly translates to first song of the year. So this time, Waley is the one to hit it on the nose for direct translation. But I feel Tyler has the most clever title. Waley has another gender discrepancy, saying that the Akashi princess has page boys. These would actually be page girls. There's no way Genji would allow any boy near his daughter. For two simple translation differences, Waley uses five-leaved pine versus Washburn's five-needle pine, and the bird referred to in this chapter is called a warbler by everyone except Waley, who calls it a nightingale. And they're all right, kind of. Nightingale is simply what the English call a bush warbler, and Waley was English. The lady from Akashi compares her little girl to a warbler with a gift she sent to her, a mechanical warbler on a pine branch, and in the accompanying poem. The little girl is encouraged by her father to answer with her own poem, which she does. Waley says that the mother would know for certain that the poem had been written without grown-up assistance. Washburn says it has the whiff of poetic exercise, which Tyler explains as she had simply mirrored the imagery and wordplay. Is anyone surprised a 7-year-old's poem would be a little simple? While speaking of his daughter to Tamakazura, Genji mentions that she is having a music lesson and encourages her to join according to our later 3 translators, but Waley translates the passage as asking her to take charge of the Akashi princess's music lessons. This would be odd, as we have yet to hear whether or not Tamakazura has any musical talent, and if anyone should teach her, her mother would be a great candidate, as she is an accomplished musician. After visiting the ladies at Rokujo and spending the night with the Akashi lady, Genji returns to a prickly Murasaki. Waley says that she pretended to be asleep, and who could blame her? But the rest of the translators assert that it was Genji who laid down, either next to Murasaki or in his own sleeping quarters, and pretended to sleep. For this new year, we're reminded that it is early spring, being told of the new shoots of grass in the places where the snow is melted, but it's plum blossoms that come up the most often. The buds on the trees create a beautiful show of color in the misty early spring, and the scent of the blossoms intensifies as the chapter moves forward. And while snow is melted in patches on New Year's Day, fresh flakes fall during the Otoko-toka. When Genji catches the gentlewomen relaxing, some of them have a hand slipped into the front fold of their robes. Tyler says this is called futokorode, and it is as casual as a man putting his hand in his pants pocket. This may not seem like a big deal, but in a culture where appearances are everything, getting caught in too informal a pose could potentially damage your reputation. Mirror rice cakes are mentioned. These are glutinous rice cakes, or mochi, in a round, flattened shape that I suspect are very similar to the stylized kagami mochi that date to the Muromachi period and are still used today to celebrate the new year. The women were celebrating hagatame. This celebrating of the length of days, as Tyler calls it, is best described by Washburn, who says in a footnote, hagatame literally means tooth hardening and was used as a general reference for the New Year's feast at the court. Tyler says that these feasts were done during the first 3 days of the new year. For the occasion, one ate a set range of foods that included boar or pheasant, venison or snipe, and sweetfish, ayu. Washburn continues, these feasts always included mochi as a key celebratory food. Because of its chewy consistency, eating mochi was thought to strengthen the teeth. The wordplay, however, is more complex, because the word for one's years, i.e. lifespan, yowai, could be written with the character for tooth. The women are directly praying for all manner of blessings and love and fortune for the coming year. That's also Washburn, as well as celebrating and praying for the long life of their lord. Let's talk briefly about the Otoko-toka, or mumming. This happens on the 14th of the first month. Some gentlemen of the court of the 5th and 6th ranks perform saibara, which are accompanied vocal music and dances. They wear soft leaf or bud green outer robes over white inner layers. This is essentially a reverse willow combination, and have cloth posies or cotton flowers on their caps. And the dancers wear a tall hat, which Waley erroneously calls a turban, but Tyler identifies as kokoji, which are especially high caps worn by the dancers, generally 2 men of the 6th rank, wearing cloth masks. We'll come back to the cotton reference. In this year, the first day aligned with the first day of the rat. To celebrate this, the Akashi princess's page girls are pulling up seedling pines. Tyler calls this a gesture that encouraged longevity. The word for rat, ne, is a homophone with the word for root, hence the pulling up by the root of seedling pines, which represent long life, as pine does, as well as being a symbol of the new year and spring. We are reminded, as emotion wells up in Genji, that tears are inauspicious on New Year's Day. From previous chapters, we also know that tears are not to be shed at the beginning of journeys either. And one last tidbit, Genji wants to hold a concert and decides to style it as a goen, a concluding banquet, which is typically a banquet given by the emperor to the mummers, normally in the 2nd or 3rd month, which I suppose makes it another reward or gift for them. I find it interesting, though not surprising, that gifts are common, and absolutely expected in some cases, for the new year. Genji is said to have had a grand distribution of trinkets and New Year presents which were second to none. And of course we already know about the clothing he dispersed, but some of that has also to do with the changing of the season, which meant not only did the weight or type of silk for garments change, but furnishings too were changed. When appearances are everything, fashion rules and one must keep up with the seasonal changes. When the lady from Akashi sent the gift of a mechanical warbler to her daughter, it was accompanied by bearded baskets, as Seidensticker calls them, full of fruits and flowers and extraordinary delicacies. These were baskets that did not have the ends trim or woven in, hence bearded. There are gifts given to the mummers. These gifts were also of the highest quality, equal to those given by the imperial palace, and specifically cotton. And here we are, back at cotton. Are you surprised? I'm a bit surprised. Cotton. Really? Really? Entirely possible via trade with Korea, back to China, back to India, and this was an imperial level gift, but I just have no idea. Does this really mean cotton? It was my understanding that cotton didn't really make an appearance in Japan until the 15th century. I'll have to look into this more. I can't accept it at face value because cotton is frequently used as a gloss term for a variety of textiles, so yeah, more research is needed. Mostly we think about silk when thinking of Japanese textiles, like the silk in the New Year gifts Genji dispersed. While visiting his ladies, we get comments about how their outfits turned out for them, except for Murasaki. For her, we're only told that she and Genji looked perfect together. Waley says that Hanachiyo Sato's ensemble was not a great success, but the other translators disagree. Seidensticker says that her azure robe was quietly becoming, and Tyler calls it discreet. Washburn describes the light blue robe as combining with the hues of her other robes to create a subtle, quiet effect. That sounds like a success to me. Several of the descriptions of women discuss their hair, and we have a translation difference in this as well. Hanachiyo Sato's hair has thinned considerably, and 3 of our translators say that Genji thinks she should be convinced to use false hair. Seidensticker calls it a switch, which is just another term for false hair or wig. Tyler just says wig, and Washburn calls this hair extensions. Waley says that she is going to use false locks. I know there's a difference between extensions and a full wig, and I wonder which it actually is. I will say that it makes me feel better about wearing a dark brown wig when I dress in Heian ensembles. I love my pink hair, but it harshes my vibe a bit with Heian dress as it's the wrong color and the wrong length. If it were longer, I could get over the color. I'll give it a few years. Tamakazura's hair is said by all of our translators to be thinning a bit at the edges, likely from stress and depression about her life thus far. Waley says Tamakazura's robe is of pattern Carrier Rose. From the last chapter, you may recall that he describes it as a red gown with a pattern of Carrier Rose, but the rest describe it as a yellow or Carrier Rose colored gown. I find this interesting because it means that she is not wearing the ensemble Genji gave to her. The ensemble had a red gown and a russet gown lined in yellow. The lady from Akashi has exquisitely refined taste. An example is given to us in the brief description of a cushion that a Chinese koto is resting on. 2 of our translators, Seidensticker and Washburn, say it is specifically Luonyong brocade, imported from China. It must have been very striking. I find it interesting that the formal robe Genji selected for her also has a Chinese air about it. Here we have evidence that things from China were still fashionable despite there being no official envoys to China. Suetsu Muhana, Princess Safflower, looked just as awful in her willow robe as Genji thought she would. Tyler calls it a disaster, presumably because of its wearer, which makes me wonder, why give her that one? Surely there were more suitable things available. Compounding the mismatch of formal robe to wearer, she wears a dark or black, stiffly starched robe with it. Waley says on top, but all of the others say it was under the willow robe. Tyler calls it a dark layering, while Washburn uses singlet, which I understand as hitoe, the unlined base garment for all the robes above. Seidensticker's translation almost made me spit my drink out. He says she looks like she was congealed in a frosting of white over something of dark, dull gray, so stiff it rustled dryly. Her hair, which was the only thing she had going for her looks-wise, was now thinned and possibly very gray or white. Genji tells her that she should wear warm, soft things. Seidensticker calls out quilted garments. He says she could even layer 7 white robes up to keep her warm. For some reason, I interpreted these underrobes to mean the kosude that are worn underneath the nagabakama trousers and everything else. Suetsu Muhana says she's been cold since she gave her mantle of sable, as Waley calls her fur, to her brother, a mountain ascetic. Apparently, this garment was considered smart several generations ago, but is now seriously dated, so Genji is practically relieved it's gone. He has the Nijo storehouses opened and provides her with either made robes in plain and patterned silks or just the fabric. This varies between our translators a bit. When he visits Utsutsume, the lady of the molted cicada shell, he's touched that she is wearing the robes in varied colors he sent. I find this a little odd, as Tyler only mentions one robe in blue-gray that was sent, while the other translators all asserted that she was given underrobes as well. From the last chapter, we know that giving a robe without the underrobe isn't considered proper, so once again, I'll assert that Tyler was mistaken in this. During the mumming, the ladies of the Rokujo estate were gathered to enjoy it, and their sleeves spilled out from under the curtains. Tyler says, "The sleeves, each lovelier than the last, spilling out from where each lady sat, recalled by the brilliance and the beauty of their colors, spring brocade glowing through the mists of dawn." What a lovely image. What stood out for you in this chapter? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Join me next time for chapter 24, Kocho, Butterflies. Subscribe if you'd like to explore the Heian period of Japan with me through the Tale of Genji.